the potential was a frost any day of the year, even during the summer. So he had built a very large greenhouse, and all of his fruit trees were inside of this greenhouse. And so naturally, you didn't get the natural pollinators that you would if the trees were out and about. And so I remember one of my tasks that year was I was given a little paintbrush like that, and I had to crawl all over the tree, going from blossom to blossom,
Wow.
pollinating.
The Ready Life, into the country.
Hi, my name's Lisa.
And I'm Nancy Meisner.
Welcome back to the Ready Life podcast, where you learn how to become more independent for your basic necessities like water, heat, food, and the power that most of us have come to depend on. Today's episode, we're going to be talking about pollination. It's something we mentioned in one of our other podcasts, but we really wanted to kind of spend a little bit more time talking about it because it's a question that comes up a lot with beginner or new gardeners. How do I make sure that my plants are being pollinated so I get an abundant harvest?
Well, there's several ways that we can talk about today. There's natural pollination. This is the hummingbirds. On their beaks and their feathers, they're going to take pollen from one plant to another and cross-pollinate. Butterflies do the same thing. Bees do the same thing. And even moths. Moths actually, most moths are night pollinators. They will pollinate the plants that bloom during the night or at dusk. They go around to plants. So those are natural pollinators. And the crops that generally need pollination are things like apples and blueberries and raspberries, melons, peaches, cherries, even potatoes, other things like that. The wind is another type of natural pollination, and typically tomatoes and corn are pollinated by the wind. So out in the big fields, the wind will do its job. In a smaller home garden, you don't always, many times it's more sheltered and you don't always. So what can you do then? And you can manually pollinate if you notice that you're not getting fruit production. And you can't always tell that right away. On some things you can tell it sooner than others. But we mentioned earlier that tomatoes can be easily pollinated, hand pollinated manually just by tapping the plant when it gets to its growth and the flowers are there. If you notice that the flowers are falling off and maybe not producing the little baby tomatoes, just think about what the weather's been like and what it's like that day. And when you go make your visit to the garden in the morning or at midday, tap the plants as you go by. Just kind of tap them, and that pollen will fall down and float down through the air from the top to those to the little flowers. And corn is a little bit different. With corn, you have male and female parts. The tassel is the male, and the silks on the ears of corn are the females. And I don't know if everybody knows this, but each silk is responsible for one kernel of corn. So if you get if you get some ears of corn that have missing kernels, that's because those silks didn't get pollinated. And so once the tassels start producing pollen, watch for the next few days, and silks will come out of the ears about several days after the tassels are starting to produce the pollen. And then you can just break off a tassel. They're up high generally, and they break pretty easy. And then just brush that tassel on the silks of the ears right then. And you've hand pollinated. You've done a manual pollination. Rainy weather can inhibit natural pollination and things like that. So in those cases, be aware that you might need to hand pollinate. Things like melons and cukes and squash actually have male and female flowers. The male flowers come out first, and then a couple days later, the female flowers will come out. And if you look carefully, you can identify the female flowers because they have a little baby fruit at the base. The male flowers will produce the pollen, but the females have a little baby fruit. So you can either use your finger or you can use like a little paintbrush that comes like in a paint by number set or something like that. And just take that and touch the male flower that has the pollen and then move it over to the female flower and you've hand pollinated. And if you notice that you have something that doesn't seem to be actually producing fruit, and I've had this happen with squash and things like that frequently, and you can just do that and take care of it that way.
Yeah, when I was a student in high school, my senior year, I had the privilege of going to a school where we learned how to do a lot of these practical things. Wow. And it was in an area where they would get a frost pretty much, the potential was a frost any day of the year, even during the summer. So he had built a very large greenhouse and all of his fruit trees were inside of this greenhouse. And so naturally, you didn't get the natural pollinators that you would if the trees were out and about. And so I remember one of my tasks that year was I was given a little paintbrush like that, and I had to crawl all over the tree, going from blossom to blossom, wow. pollinating the plum tree and the apricot tree and the peach tree. It was really cool. I learned a lot, though, about, using a paintbrush and pollinating a tree that was indoors. But it's very simple. Yeah. It's so simple, and anyone can do it.
You might wonder, well, how can I encourage the natural pollination? Because, of course, that's much easier than doing every blossom by blossom.
That's right.
But there are ways that you can encourage the natural pollination. And one that I've used is a cottage garden containing flowers. In the past, cottage gardens were around every home just about, and they had a duty. They were, they had fruits and vegetables in them mixed in with flowers, and sometimes there'd be a beehive in the midst of the cottage garden. It was very functional. It wasn't just what we think of as a photo that we want to take of a picture-perfect cottage garden. But I have always loved cottage gardens. And when we first moved to our property, I would have ideas of how I wanted to have a little secret garden and have a little entryway to it and this and that. And I'd draw diagrams and while we were building and try to encapsulate what my ideas were. But when we actually got the cabin built, I didn't want a secret garden. I wanted flower gardens where I could see them from our dining room table. When I went in the back door, I wanted to brush past flowers and smell the smell and see the colors. And so I started working on my cottage gardens then. And I started with the idea that I wanted mostly perennials because I didn't want to have to keep buying from year to year. And so I started with peonies and irises and different things. My actual first garden, I hadn't really developed the area outside of our dining area yet into a flower garden. And so I actually took I had foxgloves. I had saved the seeds from hiking in Oregon and finding some wild foxgloves there. And I had bought some hollyhock seeds that were a black color, which was really a deep burgundy, but it looked almost black. And I planted those in my vegetable garden at the time because I wanted an area that was protected. And so they came up, and I was gone for a couple weeks and came back, and they were in full bloom, and they were glorious. And here I had this little area out near our dining area that I'd been working on trying to get ready to plant in, and it wasn't quite ready, but I rushed and got it ready, and I could not wait. I didn't wait for the proper transplanting time. I got my wheelbarrow, and I got it down in the vegetable garden, and I dug up a lot of soil around each plant so that I hoped by doing that I wouldn't kill them because I was transplanting them while they were blooming, which is quite a no-no. But I had this wheelbarrow full of glorious beauty, taking it up to the house and planting it in my new cottage garden. And I watered it, and they got a lot of water and a lot of love. And the hollyhocks drooped for a day or two. The foxgloves didn't miss a beat. And I had this instant cottage garden. So I fell in love with cottage gardens that way. And of course, all the bees and the hummingbirds and everything are coming to your cottage garden. And so there came a time that cottage garden our trees were getting too tall and they weren't getting enough sun, and I knew I needed to move things. So I said, why not move them down to the vegetable garden? I had a row that wasn't really doing well right next to my fence. That row never seemed to do well with vegetables. So I said, I'm just going to have a border cottage garden along the border. So I planted everything down there. I thought it would take me 10 years to fill it up, and I filled it up within the first year and a half, I think. And it has been glorious. And I have all kinds of natural pollinators coming there to the flowers, and then they're right there next to the vegetables. And at the end of each vegetable row, I actually have a clump of flowers on each end. A few of my rows don't have any yet, but most of them do.
So ladies, take note. You have a good reason now to go buy those flowers you've been wanting for a while.
And they thrive there. The deer can't get to them, and they work as wonderful pollinators in addition to bringing a lot of joy and beauty to your garden.
That's right. Oh, I'm really excited about planting a flower garden too. We are just working on getting our area ready for that, but keeping in mind all of these great ways to encourage pollinators to come into your yard and into your garden is really a great way. So yes, think about that as you plan ahead and start working on mapping out your garden, especially in the early spring. But plan for a cottage garden, and who doesn't love to have a beautiful bouquet of flowers on their dining table once in a while?
And a few hummingbird feeders. And if you're really ambitious, put a beehive in the middle of them.
There you go. All right. Well, thank you so much, Mom, for sharing from your wisdom on pollination, your experience.
I've learned a lot of things the hard way.
Yes. Well, hopefully you won't have to. Thanks so much for joining us today, and we wish you a wonderful, fruitful, and abundant garden this summer.
Yes.
All right. Well, thanks for joining.
Bye-bye.
Bye.